chasing a candidate they never saw coming. Every night, our experts break it down.
What New Yorkers want above all else is authenticity.
We're listening to the people who matter most, you, the voters. And when the candidates sit across from us, nothing's off the table. What's your plan to make New York City feel like a safer city?
S.E. Cupp, that's your perception. Of course there's a lot of crime.
So what's happening right now? Let's dive in. Welcome to Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. It is Tuesday, October 14th, and we are just 21 days away. That's 3 weeks, folks, from this all-important New York City mayoral election. And later in today's show, we're going to talk about what the rest of America is talking about, the larger implications of this race. But first, as always, let's get to the latest news fresh from the campaign trail. And joining me for that is Joe Anuta, a reporter covering City Hall for Politico. Joe, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Some big Mamdani news today. First, let's start with his rally last night in Washington Heights. It was called Our Time Has Come. And this wasn't any rally. He had a very special guest with him. Tell us about it, Joe.
I think there were about 3,000 people there. It was quite an event. And the special guest of honor was New York Attorney General Tish James, who, has been recently sued by the Trump Department of Justice for mortgage fraud. And really, this was her first appearance since those charges have happened. She had canceled some other events. So I think, it was, she spoke very forcefully in favor of Zohran Mamdani. I mean, she's been a big booster of his throughout the campaign. And I think, just the fervency of the crowd there, I think speaks to kind of the movement that is boosting Mamdani's candidacy. I don't think you're going to see people flocking to a Cuomo rally with the same energy that shows up there. I mean, there's a lot of young people who are very excited about his campaign. And I think part of the idea behind the rally was, the primary was very competitive. He was the underdog. He's not the underdog anymore. And so they're trying to keep this energy up with their base to say, hey, we still have to vote in November.
Yeah, good points. There's 3 weeks, which both feels like a minute, but it's also a lifetime in politics. And so they know that they have to keep this momentum going. And we keep saying that the national implications of this race cannot be ignored. And certainly having the recently indicted Tish James, one of President Trump's top targets, stand alongside you at your rally is sending a national message. But I'm wondering, Joe, because you cover the city, what do New Yorkers think of Tish James? Are they firmly sort of, with her, against Trump? Do they have a different idea about her? Tell us.
No, I think she's pretty, especially within New York City for sure. She pretty handily won her last race, I think. And, New York City voters tend to not be fans of Donald Trump. And even before this happened, she prosecuted Donald Trump. And I think this has only kind of cemented her as this anti-Trump figure in the minds of New York City voters. So I think, I'm sure Mamdani's campaign has been thrilled to have her as really kind of his most prominent endorser and backer.
And one of his earliest ones. I mean, long time before some other Democrats were backing him, she was on board. Okay, in other Mamdani news, he's announced he'll sit down for a big interview tomorrow. Where's that at, Joe?
Oh, it's at Fox with Martha and
Fox News. Fox News. Not Fox New York. Fox News. That's just so everyone's clear with Martha McCallum.
Yes. And it'll be interesting. I mean, I think he's made a real effort to talk to people throughout the general election, where I think he has moderated some of his positions. He's been going to places that aren't necessarily the most friendly to him. And I don't know if there's really that big of a downside for him. I think folks who watch that, most people probably have a preconceived notion of him, and maybe he can win them over. Maybe he gets some kudos just for showing up. I think Bill de Blasio had some very mixed results when he would do some of these national interviews. So I'll be watching for sure.
Well, me too. And yeah, you sort of touched on this. not a lot of New York City Democrats watch Fox News. I'm guessing. Okay. I'm guessing. I used to go on that network. I didn't often hear from a lot of New York Democrats. That's just, they're not tuning in. So it's definitely not his audience. It's not ideologically his audience. It's not geographically his audience. This is a national audience of mostly MAGA viewers. What do you think is the point of this, other than to show I'm willing to go into uncomfortable places?
Well, I think it's that. And again, I just don't think there's that much downside to him. And maybe he could impart people, hey, I'm not as scary as everyone talks about.
I think that's what he's betting on. Once you hear me talk, I'm charming and I won't be as scary as even people on this network, have said I am. We'll see. I know you'll be watching, Joe. I'll be watching. Maybe we'll have to talk about it afterwards. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Okay, and when we come back, more Battleground NYC, we'll talk to someone about the larger implications of this race because there are so many. Stay tuned. We're back with Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. And with just 3 weeks left in this race, every moment is going to count. We just talked about how 3 weeks is a lifetime in some ways. It's also around the corner. We have some big moves from the frontrunner, Zohran Mamdani. His nearest opponent has gained 10 points on him in the past 2 weeks. And there's a debate this week, so there's a lot to discuss. And joining me now for the bigger picture is JC Polanco, an attorney and assistant professor at the University of Mount St. Vincent. Always good to talk to you, JC. Thanks for coming back.
So happy to be here with you today. Thank you.
Okay, there's a lot going on. What did you make of the fact that Mamdani brought Tish James out on stage with him at last night's rally? That seemed to be something of a statement he was making.
Yes, Tish James, who I ran against in 2017, by the way, is an elder in the Democratic Party. She is. She gives a lot of legitimacy to an upstart like Assemblyman Mamdani. I mean, we're talking about the state's top executive officer when it comes to legal enforcement. And you're talking about someone who is a national figure. So her being there does a couple of things. First, it gives Assemblyman Mamdani gravitas, but it also lets her feel the energy from a lot of the base in the Democratic Party that she's not alone and she's being hunted down by the Trump Department of Justice. So it went both ways yesterday. She definitely needed that booster.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah. What she could gain in that momentum as well. You know, if you didn't know better, you might be forgiven for thinking that Mamdani is running against Trump because the way they both, interact with each other and talk about each other a lot. Mamdani talks about Trump's national agenda, not just his own New York City agenda. And one day he might run against Trump, but is there any danger, just from a strategy perspective, that he's looking a little too ambitious, that he's looking like he wants to take on Trump and not just focus on what's happening in New York City?
Now, the Constitution says you got to be born here to run against the president. He won't be running for president, but I'll tell you this.
That's
He,
true.
he knows that he thrives when the media focuses on the beef between him
Yeah,
and
that's right.
President Trump. I mean, the fundraising, the energy behind those that support Assemblyman Mamdani rise anytime President Trump says anything bad about Mamdani. It's almost like he's on our team. And, as I mentioned to you before, if there was an election between COVID-19 and President Trump, COVID-19 wins by 5 in New York City. So he's incredibly unpopular, President Trump here. I know there's some pockets where they love him. I got you. But citywide, no. So he looks very good. And again, remember what I shared with you, that President Trump needs Mayor Mamdani, especially moving forward. So the fact that President Trump takes every opportunity to call him a Marxist, to call him a communist, to talk about deporting, he knows exactly what he's doing. He needs a Mayor Mamdani to get elected because it will provide the buffer that he so desperately needs moving on into the midterm election. And for elections that are coming right before the midterm, like the New Jersey governor's race and the Virginia governor's race, and so many others that are happening before the midterms come in.
And moving on to this Fox News interview that's happening tomorrow with Martha McCallum. On the one hand, as we've discussed, it's rarely a good idea for a local candidate to do national news. But is this actually smart? It's free media, right? I mean, this is a way for him to get out and look like I'm not afraid to go anywhere.
Yeah. Pete Buttigieg does this, and I got to give him props for that.
Yeah, he does.
He sits down with Fox and he goes one-on-one. Look, let me tell you something. I think is the charmer in Assemblyman Mamdani. Assemblyman Mamdani has some of the craziest policies ever. I mean, if we sit down and study them, it just boggles the mind how much support he gets. And I think it has a lot to do with the mesmerizing and the hypnotic nature of that Mamdani smile. I think you sit down and he smiles, and before you know it, you forget about defunding the police. You forget about the legalization of prostitution. What misdemeanors? What did I say that I wanted to get rid of them and close jails? When did I say that? And did I say raising rents and raising taxes and freezing rents and creating a housing crisis in New York City? You forget about everything, absolutely everything. What do you mean there's a video talking about seizing the means of production? Look at my smile. You forget right away. So I hope that when he sits down on Fox, the moderator doesn't fall into the hypnotic nature that you get from the Assemblyman smile. But I can see that happen. Who knows?
Well, I know Martha McCallum. She doesn't fall for much. She's a pretty good interview, so I'm sure she'll hold his feet to the fire. Mamdani's Israel statement I wanted to get you on. He released it yesterday. It doesn't mention Trump at all, interestingly. But as a political pro, as an independent, would you consider this issue, the issue of Gaza, less determinative today in this race than it was before Trump announced this ceasefire? Is this issue now sort of effectively off the table for this election?
I think it may be too soon for it to be completely off the table.
Okay.
I think that his statement came in at 4:30 yesterday, which I consider to be very late in the game, considering that this is something that was very important, considering that this will bring peace, this will create an environment where another child is going to see another day. I think this is great. But unfortunately, if you take a look at the Assemblyman's position, it was one that doesn't give credit to the administration for bringing peace to Gaza and Israel, doesn't really celebrate life as we know it that will continue in this situation that we have now. And I think it was important when you see Congress members like Goldman and other folks say, good job to this administration for bringing peace. I think it would have been great, magnanimous at the very least, for him to take that position. But this is part of a bigger picture. And I know that I get a lot of heat on social media, especially when I'm on your program and I mentioned this. I hope you hear me out. The issue is that a lot of the supporters of Assemblyman Mamdani, many of the supporters, not all, obviously, are, in my opinion, hide behind the veil of anti-Zionism because they have strong positions against Jewish New Yorkers. We've seen it since October 7th with the rallies and the things that they've said and how they've made it uncomfortable for Jewish students in many of our universities. That's just a fact. And look, the fact that he can go on national television and say, I don't police speech, that's why I don't condemn globalize the intifada, I think that's weak. And it goes to show that he has a base of supporters that needs to hear that. The reality is we have to speak with a moral clarity. I condemn the N-word. I don't say that I wouldn't use it. I condemn it fully. And I'm sure that he would too. I'm sure he would say in the midst of the Black Lives Matter movements, when someone would say all lives matter, I'm sure he would say, no, wait a minute. Why do you say that? Why isn't it Black Lives Matter? When one of my students gets misgendered, I get in and I completely say, hey, wait a minute. We all have a moral compass and we all know when we have to police speech. The speech he won't condemn is one that is very hurtful to Jews. And I think strongly is because there's a large part of his base, not all, miss me with that. A large part of the base that needs to hear that red meat. And I think he gives it to them every time. And yesterday, waiting until 4:30 to celebrate peace between Gaza and Israel, I think it's weak. But look, is it too late? I know that there's a divide among the Jewish New Yorkers. Many young people are going to support him because of the generational divide. But I think that's going to be an issue for him in the general.
Well, if it's going to be an issue, it's going to come up in this debate on Thursday. So we'll all be waiting and watching to see if it does. JC, don't go anywhere. I've got more questions after the break. More Battleground NYC after this. We're back with more Battleground NYC. Joining me again for the bigger picture is JC Polanco, an attorney and assistant professor at the University of Mount St. Vincent. Let's get into the debates, JC, because I'm very excited. This is my Super Bowl. Well, it's like my playoffs, right? If the election's the Super Bowl, these are the playoffs, and I'm excited. Let's go candidate by candidate. What is Mamdani's job on Thursday night?
Mamdani has to stay on cruise control. He has to explain why he has the experience to take on this job. You, me, everyone is watching this debate as interviewers. These people want a job. There's only 3 candidates left. So each one has an important role. Here, Mamdani has to say, look, this is why I'm qualified to be CEO of New York City. I know I've said some crazy things in the past. I've changed my mind, but this is why I've changed my mind. Explain to us how you've evolved to this new moderate Mamdani that you're selling across the city. And then, be ready some tough questions. These moderators are coming in. They understand this is a job interview. So they want to know how you're going to handle some of the tough situations. And I hope they put him in positions where he has to make tough decisions on transportation, on crime, on education, on subway, how to deal with unions, things that he has never done in his life. He's going to have to show us how he has what it takes to handle the job. Stay on cruise control. Don't go into your parables and your, biblical talk. Just stay focused, answer the question, and do a lot of the smiling thing because it hypnotizes folks.
He's also introducing himself to a much larger audience because I imagine a lot of folks are going to be tuning in to this around the country. They're going to be watching it on streamers or YouTube. Should he keep that in mind, this bigger audience, or should he really just focus on New York City voters?
He has to focus on New York City voters. I'm sure that the entire country is watching, but he's best when he focuses on New York City and talks about it. Look, he's very good on the debate stage. I have no doubt that he's going to go in there polished. So that's why it's critical that he just maintain on cruise control and just.
What would a mistake look like for Mamdani?
A mistake is anything that shows his inexperience. That's his biggest albatross. His albatross is his inexperience. He hasn't, and I've beat him up a lot when I examine his resume. There's nothing there that says I'm ready to be CEO of New York City government. So your job is to tell us why you are. And if there is any room there by the moderators to go in on any details regarding city government that any mayor should know or how they should handle it, and it looks like if he doesn't know the math, if the math ain't mathing to the programs he's been promising, that's a weakness. So he has to come prepared, no lofty stuff, and be direct. Look, you're talking to Republicans and independents, and a lot of Democrats. 72% of Democrats stayed home on that last week of June where he won that primary. He's speaking to them too. And these are not voters that are just going to be mesmerized with, free buses, free this, free that, and the other. They want to hear concrete stuff. So be prepared for that.
Okay. And what about Andrew Cuomo? He has jumped up 10 points in the polls since Eric Adams dropped out, but he's still behind Mamdani. What's his job at this debate?
His job is to talk to those 72% of Democrats that didn't show up. He has to tell them, look, you know me. You know what I'm about. You may not have come out in
For
June.
good
I
and
understand.
bad.
Look, we're not
for better
perfect.
and worse.
Yeah. Look, I'm sorry. I should have campaigned better. I should have inspired you to come out. I'm not good at TikTok. I'm not a TikTok influencer. All right. You got me. But look, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I promise to do. Bring some of those 72% in by reminding them. These are mostly Democrats that only vote in presidential elections. They don't really come out in primaries. They're sleepy. Excite them at the last minute by reminding them the contrast. So that night, it's all about contrast. Governor Cuomo has to just contrast the whole night. This is what I do. This is what the Democratic Socialists of America would do. And focus on that nonstop, rekindle that relationship with the Democrats that stayed home. One more thing he has to do.
Yeah.
He can't win this without picking up Republicans and independents. He has to convince Republicans and independents that, Curtis Lewa has dedicated his life to public service through the Guardian Angels. He's a good man, but this is why I'd be better than Mamdani for you. And I have the best shot of winning. And you may not like some of the things I did in Albany, but I promise you that we're capitalists. We're going to be tough on law and on crime. Give me your support and not beat up on Mr. Sliwa. Just focus on bringing Democrats in and independents and Republicans that may be sitting on the fence with Mr. Sliwa. It's his only shot.
What can't Cuomo afford to do on Thursday night?
He cannot afford to do this, etc. He says, etc. The man's resume is from the Bronx to Staten Island. The man is eminently qualified to be CEO of New York City government. But sometimes in the midst of the battle, instead of saying, hey, I did this and A, B, C, and D, and this is why I'm better than this resume next to you, and this is why I'm better for this job, because it's a job interview. I've seen the governor go, et cetera, and et cetera, and et cetera. Like, don't do that tonight. This is an important job interview, and it's about reminding folks who you are, that you've been out of the stage for a little bit. You've been in the press as having lost a primary to Mamdani. A lot of people think you went one-on-one. This never happened. Governor Cuomo has never had a one-on-one and never will have a one-on-one against Assemblyman Mamdani. He has to explain why he's best qualified.
Okay, good stuff. I've got one more round of questions for you, JC, so don't go anywhere. More Battleground NYC after this. And we're back with more Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote, one last time with JC Polanco, an attorney and assistant professor at the University of Mount St. Vincent. Okay, we were talking about the debates. We talked about what Mamdani and Cuomo can and cannot do. What about Curtis Sliwa? He's the only Republican, so that really helps him sort of differentiate himself automatically. But what else could he do Thursday night to actually change this race?
Remember, it's a job interview, Curtis. He knows he has to come in and tell New Yorkers why he's qualified. We know the Red Beret. We know about the Guardian Angels. Translate that to being a CEO of New York City government. Talk about the fact that it was an international organization that went to some of the toughest parts in the world to keep people safe. That, mention how you ran that organization, then talk about the things that you're going to do. Translate that experience to executive experience. A lot of people want to hear that he knows about government. One of the biggest complaints I hear is, who is Curtis? Has he ever had government office? Well, this is an opportunity for him to explain how he knows it and how he's going to be able to translate his experience of being CEO of New York City government.
I wanted to get your take on something I've been noticing, JC. The Washington Post has had several editorials about Zohran Mamdani recently. One from this week is headlined, Zohran Mamdani's grand promises are a struggle bus. That one is critical of his free bus promise. Another one from last week was headlined, holding back gifted students in the name of equity. That one was critical of his plan to end the gifted and talented program in public schools. Another one from September headlined, New York's Zohran Mamdani holdout, and that talked about all the Democrats who didn't want to endorse him. Now, JC, I'm a journalist. I write for a New York City newspaper. I haven't written as many Mamdani pieces as the Washington Post editorial board has. It's weird. These aren't opinion writers. This is the editorial board. I'm wondering if you see this as, in your opinion, a result of Jeff Bezos' takeover over of that page and wanting more conservative viewpoints there? Is it a result of the attention this race is getting in Washington? And so this is for the Washington political class? What's going on here? It seems like Washington is very focused on Mamdani and they don't like him.
Yes, I don't know about don't like him, don't like his policies. I've read the editorials, and they're laser focused on the problems of the socialist agenda and the socialist
Correct.
politics. So, and I want to make sure that's clear. But there needs to be that kind of balance. If you go right now, and I ask everyone to just put in Mamdani and New York Times, and all you're going to get is an assortment of, oh my God, inside the improbable, audacious, and unstoppable rise. How Mamdani
very positive coverage.
It's like, oh my God, it's the second coming of Jesus I'm reading about. So you definitely need some sort of counterbalance. And I think that what you have there are moderate Democrats, centrist Democrats. You have capitalists that are concerned about what will happen if socialism continues to expand across cities in the country. So I don't know whether or not this is a biased perspective, other than, look, these are some of the anti-fluff pieces that you can focus on. Look at the numbers. They just don't work. And you need that kind of balance in America today because it's just been nonstop to the left.
Okay, and last question for you before we go. After the debates, if the first polls we get after the debates are tighter, closer than they are today before the first debate, do you change your mind about the inevitability of this race? Is this race less inevitable if the polls change right after these debates?
Yes, if the polls change after the debates, it means that New York City is now focused and they may be thinking about the top two candidates. That's really what, and I'm looking at the poll numbers, that's what Governor Cuomo wants to see. Governor Cuomo thinks that after this debate, the city is going to be laser focused and is going to take the threats of the Democratic Socialists of America taking over the Democratic Party and City Hall seriously, and that this will be a one-on-one. It's a tough situation considering that Curtis Lee was campaigning so hard and he's putting it all on the line. There's nothing about Curtis Lee that shows that he's dropping. The only hope that we had, that Governor Cuomo would have, is to try to attract some of those Sliwa voters over to his side. If you see the polls get closer after the debates and Governor Cuomo does a good job, then you're going to see a lot more energy behind the national focus being on two people heading into November. And the days in eternity.
And conversely, I do. But and conversely, if these polls remain with Mamdani way ahead after the debate, after the second debate, I think we can say pretty clearly, unless some crazy, external event happens, it looks like this is Mamdani's to lose. I'm so excited to talk to you after Thursday night, whether that's Friday or next week. I can't wait to hear your takes on the debates.